Okay, you should be able to see my screen now. Okay, so in today's lesson, we are going to be going over diffusion, osmosis, and active transport. Okay, so we're going to look at the key points from diffusion, and we're going to look at the key points from osmosis, and then we're going to finish off by looking at the key points from active transport. Okay, so looking at diffusion, here are the key points you need to learn, and I've put them there on the screen. So we're going to have a read through those key points. So substances may move into and out of cells across the cell membranes. Okay, so remember, cells have a membrane, and a cell membrane controls what goes in and what comes out. Okay, so we've got the cell membranes, and these control what goes in and what comes out. Okay, so that's what the cell membranes are for. Now, diffusion is linked with gases. Okay, diffusion by itself is linked with gases. Now, diffusion is the spreading out of particles from an area of high concentration to an area of low concentration. So we're going from high concentration to a low concentration. So we're going from a high concentration to a low concentration, meaning it's a passive process. It doesn't require any energy, and diffusion involves gases. Okay, so we're dealing with gases at this point. Okay, so you can read that here. We have the definition here of diffusion. Diffusion is the spreading out of particles from an area of high concentration to an area of low concentration. So you can also refer to that as the net movement. Okay, and some of the oxygens transported into and out of cells by diffusion are oxygen, carbon dioxide. So we've got oxygen, carbon dioxide, and the waste products urea from cells into the blood plasma for excretion. Yeah, so diffusion is associated with gases. Okay, so just make a note of that. Now, the different factors which affect the rate of diffusion, you need to know the key ones, which are here. The difference in concentration, the temperature, and the surface area of the membrane. Okay, so if I go on the next slide and I just show you a model, let's say we had a membrane here and we had some gas molecules on each side. So this is our first diagram. Okay, this is our first diagram, and this is our second diagram. Okay, now the difference in concentration, which one has the bigger difference? We know that this one here has a bigger sort of difference. Yeah, so there's a bigger difference in concentration. Because this one has a bigger difference in concentration, this one will have the higher rate of diffusion. Okay, because this one has a minimal lower change in concentration, because it has a lower change in concentration, that means diffusion will happen at a lower rate. Okay, so these are the different factors which affect the concentration. So the rate of diffusion, sorry. We've looked at that one. Temperature. If you increase the temperature, the particles have more energy. If the particles have more energy, they can be moving faster and they can move across the membranes. So increase in temperature results in an increase in the energy. Okay, and the surface area, well, if more surface area is exposed, there are more particles. So if there is more surface area exposed, there are more particles, and if there's more particles, both of these are gonna increase the rate of diffusion. Okay. Now, a single cell organism has a relatively large surface area to volume ratio. This allows the movement of gases much quicker. So if we summarize now, so substances move into and out of cell membranes via diffusion, and the main one is gases. Gases are the ones which are moving. Diffusion moves from an area of high concentration to an area of low concentration. Again, main source includes gases, and we normally refer to it as the net movement from an area of high concentration to a low concentration, and it's also the spreading out of particles. So just remember those key words there. Some examples include oxygen and carbon dioxide, and there are factors which affect the rate of diffusion. So we've got the difference in concentrations, the temperature, and the surface area of the membrane. Okay, so we've looked at the difference in concentration. We know that over here we've got type 1 image over here, and we've got type 2 scenario here. Now we know that this one will maximize the rate of diffusion, and this one will lower the rate of diffusion. It will have a slower rate because this one has a bigger difference in concentration, and this one has a lower change in concentration. The next one is temperature. If you increase the temperature, we can see that the particles will have more energy. If the particles have more energy, they can move around much quicker and they can go across membranes. And then the surface area of the membrane, if we have a greater surface area, we've got more particles, and if we have more particles, that increases the rate of diffusion. Okay, now single cell organisms, they have a high surface area to volume ratio, and that allows them to do many things more efficiently, such as transport molecules or absorb gases, release gases, and all that sort. Okay, so these are the key points on diffusion. Okay, now if we move on to osmosis, there's a practical associated with, which we will have a look at in our next lesson. Water moves across cell membranes. Again, we know what cell membranes are for. Cell membranes control what goes in and what comes out. Okay, and osmosis is the diffusion of water. Okay, so we know what diffusion means, the moving from a high concentration to a low concentration. It's the diffusion of water. So diffusion, normal diffusion, is associated with gases moving from a high to low concentration, and osmosis is basically the diffusion of water. More dilute solution. Now dilute means more water. So all dilute means, it means more water, and concentrated means less water. So if it's moving from an area of high concentration to an area of low concentration, we're moving from a more dilute solution to a more concentrated solution. Okay, and this all happens through a partially permeable membrane, and this is the mark that many students forget to write. Partially permeable membrane is just a membrane with small holes. Okay, so to summarize, osmosis, we've got the water moves across the cell membranes. Again, that keyword by osmosis. Osmosis is the diffusion of water from a dilute to a more concentrated solution. So remember, diffusion is the movement from a high to low concentration. Osmosis is basically the diffusion of water. Okay, and all this happens through a partially permeable membrane, which is just a membrane with small holes. Okay, dilute means more water, concentrated means less water, and partially permeable membrane is just a membrane with small holes. So essentially what you need to do is just learn that definition. Osmosis is the movement of water from an area of high concentration to an area of low concentration or dilute to concentrated solution via a partially permeable membrane. Okay, now active transport, what we're going to finish on today is more dilute solution to a more concentrated solution. So same principle as with osmosis, however, active transport involves mineral ions. So we saw that diffusion was associated with gases. We saw that osmosis was associated with water. Now we know that active transport is associated with mineral ions. Okay, and this happens from an area of low concentration to an area of high concentration. Okay, so dilute solution means more water and less mineral ions, and concentrated solution means less water and more mineral ions. Okay, now active transport is to do with mineral ions, and a key place where it happens is in the plant root hairs. Yeah, so the plant root absorbs the mineral ions from the soil in a where there is a lower concentration to the plant root where there is a higher concentration. And all this is against the concentration gradient. So whenever it's moving from low to high, so whenever we're moving from low to high, that's against the concentration gradient. Against the concentration gradient. And when it's moving from high to low, it goes down the concentration gradient. Okay, so basically, ultimately over here, you need to be able to compare between active transport, diffusion, and osmosis. Okay, so dilute to concentrated against the concentration gradient requires energy from respiration. Mineral ions in plant root hairs from a very dilute solution in the soil. Okay, and they need this for growth. Okay, and here we're given here another example where it can happen in when sugar molecules are absorbed in the gut. Okay, so now you should be able to describe the difference between diffusion, osmosis, and active transport. Okay, now I'm going to put a link in the Q&A. If you guys want to a specific topic that you would want us to teach, paste the link in the Q&A. You can fill out the form and you can let us know of any topics you would want us to teach. and we will be more than happy to teach them to you in one of our free sessions. Okay, if anyone has any questions, you can let us know now. If not, then you can leave the meeting. Okay, since no one has any questions, I'm going to leave the meeting now. Thank you everyone for attending today's session, and I hope to see you next week.